President Moon Jae-in is sending a special envoy of 5 senior officials, including a national security advisor and the intelligence chief. They'll push for talks between Washington and Pyongyang. Seoul hopes to capitalize on the improved relations after last month's Winter Olympics and ease the nuclear standoff between the U.S. and the DPRK.
Trump says U.S. will meet with North Korea after months of bluster and threats toward North Korea. President Donald Trump said his administration would talk with the government of Kim Jong-un about its nuclear arms and long-range missile programs. President Barack Obama told Trump, before the new president was sworn in, that North Korea would be the most pressing global problem he would have to solve during his term. Since then, Trump at times has suggested that he would use the U.S. nuclear arsenal to take out North Korea's. His sudden pivot toward talks is just the latest example of how his policy stances often change suddenly. They, by the way, called up a couple of days ago and said, "We would like to talk." Trump said of the Kim government Saturday night at the annual Gridiron Dinner. "And I said, so would we, but you have to denuke. You have to denuke." Trump then turned to one of his most used verbal crutches when he wants to avoid promising a specific outcome. "So, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens," Trump said, according to a pool report released by the White House. "But we will be meeting and we'll see if anything positive happens. It's been a long time," Trump said. "It's a problem that should have been fixed a long time ago." After some of his critics warned he might start a major Asian conflict or even a nuclear one, Trump softened his brash tone on North Korea on Saturday, saying, "Maybe positive things are happening. I hope that's true, and I say that in all seriousness. I hope that's true," he said. Trump has long said that he would never talk with Kim's government over its nuclear and missile programs. For example, he said in a Twitter post August 30, "Talking is not the answer." But Saturday night, Trump went as far as to say direct talks with Kim are possible. "I won't rule out direct talks with Kim Jong-un. I just won't," Trump said. "As far as the risk of dealing with a madman is concerned, that's his problem, not mine. He must be a fine man."
The message is that the United States is applying maximum pressure, but it's not only on the DPRK, which is the announced policy, it's also applying maximum pressure on South Korea. The real fear that Washington has, that the U.S. government has, and I don't think it's just Trump, I think it's bigger parts of the military-industrial complex and their political operatives in Washington, what they really fear is that peace will break out in the Korean Peninsula, whereby South and North Korea begin a process of de-escalating tensions, have a thaw, possible normalization, and Washington is on the outside looking in. So we have a...
Got it. You seem to have some kinds of, what shall we call, the strategy that you perceive that the United States would have. Let's go to some specifics, Mr. Zhao. When it comes to facts, once again, the fact is it's mixed signal coming from the United States. Rhetorics vis-a-vis actions, but at the same time, there seems to be a possibility of warming up. How big is it?
I think, in fact, the mixed signals from the U.S. in recent weeks and days have becoming clearer. They are increasingly speaking with one voice. Right now, after Vice President Pence openly said U.S. would be willing to conduct so-called talks for talks with North Korea without preconditions, that view was not backtracked by the White House. That seems to represent the overall view of the United States government. I think that's a major change of position by the United States.
Because when it comes to the talks, what it should be about, the U.S. also said it is supposed to be about denuclearization, and it has to be complete, verifiable, irreversible. All of these words have been used during the six-party talks earlier for years ago. So is that the bar too high?
I think there are two things. Regarding North Korea's nuclear capability, the U.S. position has never changed, which is North Korea has to achieve complete, verifiable, and irreversible nuclear disarmament in the near-term future. That bar is very high and hasn't been lowered. But the what U.S. is saying is Washington is willing to talk with North Korea, which is different from negotiating with North Korea.
Okay.
Negotiations are about how the North Korea should reduce and even ultimately give up its nuclear weapons. But talks means the two sides simply get in touch with each other to improve mutual understanding.
Mr. Becker, do you read the same kinds of message as Mr. Zhao, or there is a sea difference between your opinions?
I have a somewhat different opinion. I think the U.S. is now saying that they're willing to talk and not negotiate, as he said, and I think that's a correct and appropriate sort of nuance there. But I think the reason that Washington says it wants to talk is it doesn't want to be completely isolated, because there's momentum between the North and the South for talks, and of course China and Russia also welcome that. But what I think the thing that we should be looking at is what Donald Trump said the other day, the announcement of the harshest sanctions yet on DPRK, and they're unilateral. They're not coming through the UN Security Council, and they allow and set the stage for the interdiction of ships on the high seas. In other words, a brave, bold, audacious move that could create incidents that would allow a new provocation to lead into some sort of even limited military conflict. I think that's where the Trump administration really is. They're trying to wiggle their way out of the problem right now that everybody wants to talk except them.
Interesting. But even after that, even after the Trump administration so-called levied the heaviest sanctions, all these are in quotes, of course, against the DPRK, in fact, Mr. Becker, if I could point out, said we could talk. We could still talk. That is after the U.S. said we're going to levy you with the heavy sanctions. So how would you read that?
I think the DPRK is very committed to a process that can lead to the de-escalation of tensions on the Korean Peninsula. I think the DPRK ultimately wants to talk. Fundamentally, they don't want war. They know that would be suicide, but they want a security guarantee. That can only come really from Washington. It won't come from South Korea. It won't come from China. It won't come from Russia. It has to come from the United States. So yes, North Korea is very willing to talk. There's a great opportunity here if Washington changes its orientation.
Mr. Zhao?
I very much agree. We have about the North Korean willing to talk with the United States directly. We really have to distinguish the North Korean rhetoric from its real intention. Just a couple of days ago, the North Korean rhetoric was still that North Korea would never beg for talks with the United States, not for the next 100, even 200 years. But in fact, what President Moon Jae-in told the international community after talking with the North Korean delegate at the opening ceremony was that the North Korean was, quote, fully willing to talking with the United States. I think which was an important change of position from the North Korean part. South Korea has trying to engage with North Korea for many months right after President Moon Jae-in came into power. But it's the North Koreans, after achieving a credible strategic nuclear deterrent, after successfully testing 3 ICBMs, I think they feel they have completed stage 1 of their goal, which is obtaining a deterrent. Then they are moving into stage 2, which is to deal with the consequences of getting their nuclear weapons. So I think the North Korea made an important change, and that's a real opportunity we should take advantage of.
North Korea ready to take measures against U.S. sanctions and join drills with South Korea, Pyongyang state media said. The Korean Central News Agency published a commentary on Saturday, noting that the key resolve and full equal exercises jointly held by South Korean and U.S. troops are set to be held next month. The 2 annual springtime drills were delayed this year to avoid an overlap with the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, during which South Korean President Moon Jae-in hoped to diffuse tensions with the North. The U.S. has continued to prattle on about holding joint military drills, and by announcing the key resolve and full legal drills will be held normally in April, it has clearly shown its inner desire to bring dark clouds of war to the Korean peninsula. It said the news agency warned that the regime would not threaten any country or area with its nukes, but it would firmly respond to invasive enemy forces that destroy the peace and security of the Korean peninsula. Regarding U.S. President Donald Trump's remarks on possibly adding stronger sanctions on the North, including a naval blockade, the commentary said Washington is raging with lunacy for a clash amid the continued easing of the atmosphere on the peninsula. If Washington continues to hang on to its sanctions and pushes ahead with the joint military drills, we will take our own method of response to rein in the U.S., which will take full responsibility for all ramifications. It said the commentary comes after North Korea's representative to the Conference on Disarmament sponsored by the United Nations declared Pyongyang is ready to respond to any military provocations or sanctions from the U.S. Yonhap reported Saturday that Han Tae-sung said in a Geneva conference last Tuesday that the North's nuclear weapons are a means of protecting its sovereignty and national security against the harsh, hostile policy and nuclear threat of the U.S. In order to defend itself from such threats, Han said the North had access to nuclear weapons and it won't hesitate to respond to any confrontations from Washington.
Not so much South Korea. It's certainly South Korea's President Moon Jae-in, who has always believed in reunification of the Korean peninsula. He's a Korean nationalist. But there are a lot of people in South Korea who don't agree with their president. And it's not only the older conservatives who remember the Korean War, it's also a lot of younger South Koreans who are South Korean nationalists who don't see that they are part of one Korean state. And so Moon has a really sort of narrow window of opportunity here, and he's got a narrowing band of support because he's been losing, his approval rating has been dropping, and I think it's going to probably drop even more over some of the things that have occurred with regard to the Olympics in North Korea.
Wouldn't most people in South Korea like to see unification? I mean, it's their uncles, their cousins, their relatives, they're Korean.
That has been the working assumption up until the early 1990s. Then South Korea saw how expensive it was for West Germany to reunify the two halves of the German state. And then the South Koreans said, no, of course we'd like reunification, but sometime in the way indefinite future. But right now, we are starting to see in South Korea a growing group of people, especially young people, who say, no, we don't want reunification. The North Koreans, yeah, they might be Koreans, but they are not part of our country. They're very different. And so this is a sea change. This is a critical change in thinking that'll have ramifications for President Moon and for South Korea going forward.
In his recent speech to CPAC, where you also spoke, President Trump, he didn't specifically say what the United States would do if sanctions with North Korea failed to deter their nuclear and missile programs. But he did say phase 2, which he said could prove very, very unfortunate for the world. What the hell did that mean?
I guess that means that the United States is going to strike North Korea. This
the
is
only
what
way
the
it
administration.
sounds.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of voices, some within the Republican Party, like Senator Graham, also people like John Bolton, the former UN ambassador, who have been arguing for a strike on North Korea in the pretty near future because they believe that we cannot allow them to have the capability to strike the American homeland with a missile. And so, therefore, I think probably President Trump was probably trying to bluff not only the North Koreans, but the Chinese as well. I don't know whether he's serious, Larry. I think very few people outside of a tight circle in the White House actually know what President Trump is thinking. I don't even know if President Trump has settled ideas on this, but clearly this really be exceedingly dangerous for him to strike North Korea at this time because we have a lot of tools, apart from the use of the military, to disarm North Korea.
Trump suggests talks with North Korea are already in the works after months of uncertainty. The president suggested Saturday night that the U.S. and North Korea will be meeting soon. They called up a couple of days ago and said, "We would like to talk. President Donald Trump said in his speech at the Gridiron Club dinner on Saturday, according to CNN. And I said, so would we, but you have to denuke. You have to denuke. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. I won't rule out talks with Kim Jong-un. I just won't, he explained. Maybe positive things are happening. I hope that's true. And we're soon going to know. We will be meeting, and we will see if anything positive happens. As far as the risks of dealing with a madman are concerned, that is his problem, not mine, he said during the joke-filled speech. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson revealed in Beijing in October that the U.S. was interested in dialogue, but Trump intervened, asserting that talking to North Korea was a waste of time. I told Rex Tillerson, our wonderful Secretary of State, that he is wasting his time trying to negotiate with Little Rocket Man, the president tweeted, adding, save your energy, Rex. We'll do what has to be done. Trump told reporters a couple of weeks later that he is always open to talks. When Tillerson announced in December that the U.S. is ready to engage the North Koreans in talks without preconditions, the White House contradicted him, stressing that the U.S. is not ready. The situation appears to have changed now that North and South Korea are talking again. Vice President Mike Pence reportedly planned to meet with the North Korean delegation at the Winter Olympics, but the North Koreans backed out of the meeting at the last minute. On his return home, Pence revealed that the U.S. is ready to talk to the North Koreans whenever they are, indicating that the administration is considering talks without preconditions. Trump, however, has stated that the U.S. and North Korea can meet only under the right conditions. We have intention to resolve issues in a diplomatic and peaceful way through dialogue and negotiation, but we will neither beg for dialogue, a North Korean Foreign Ministry spokesman said Saturday. According to North Korean state media, the dialogue we desire is the one designed to discuss and resolve the issues of mutual concern on an equal footing between states, the spokesman said.